So what was it that exactly changed in Sylvia Browne's life? Hey guys, it's John here. I've had a lot of people asking me ever since I put up my John Edward video and my Doreen Virtue video that just came out. I've had people asking me about Sylvia Browne. Now, I don't want to make this channel a John Talks About Other People channel, but I'm going to answer this because this was one of the ones that I got multiple people ask me about Sylvia Browne. So I'm going to try to pull back from doing videos about other people because I would rather talk about you and empowering you. But I wanted to make this video just because so many people asked. I have no personal experience with Sylvia Browne in person, so I've never met her. I've never seen her live. I've read several of her books. I have watched her on multiple shows. In fact, she was one of the people that if I knew she was going to be on a talk show, I would tune in to see her. She was compelling to watch because she was very, something I would call blatantly honest. She would just say whatever came into her head. I did, towards the end, start to see a lot of problems that I have seen in a lot of gifted people in my own life. I have one person in my life, and this is not Sylvia Browne. I have one person in my life who was probably one of the most gifted people that I've ever met. And then I watched her implode because of her own ego, because of her own awareness, her own self-importance. She began to think that everything she was saying was infallible. She began to think she was talking for God. And her own self-importance got to the point where she started just knocking down or verbally assaulting everybody around her. I watched her marriage implode. I watched her friends leave her. I watched everything just implode around her. She was one of those people who she got a little bit of notoriety, and immediately the drug of celebrity grabbed a hold of her, and she got lost in it. And it was so very different, the stark difference between when I first met her to when we no longer even speak right now. And that's not because I don't love or care for her. It's because I can't speak to her because every time I try to speak to her, she comes at me in a very harsh way. But the point of this video, my thoughts on Sylvia Browne, come back to that story because I think when you are a gifted individual, like Sylvia Browne obviously was, because you could literally, on some of her earliest appearances, she was so clear and so seemingly precise. Of course, we also don't know what was edited either. That I think she really truly had a gift, and I think she was truly there. But I think as her celebrity rose, you could literally hear the way she spoke change. She began to think she was infallible or say she was infallible. She would never give the caveat of, this is what I'm getting, I don't know if it's right or wrong. She was just saying, this is the fact, period, you're done. And it got to the point where people would ask her questions, and she would, and I truly believe this, she would either help them market with her answer, or she would tell them something that would feel shocking. The most famous story, of course, with Sylvia Browne is the story where the woman asked about their loved one, and she basically said, no, they're dead, honey. They're dead, right? And then they were found alive. And, basically crushed this woman thinking that her person was dead when in fact they weren't, and they were found alive. So it was one of those things where she was really buying into her own beliefs and stating things as fact. Another thing that really stands out to me was she was a frequent visitor on the Montel Williams show. And Montel decided to do a brief foray into trying to have a television series. He went off to do this TV show where he was like a coach or a teacher at a high school or something. And I watched the show and was just so disappointed in the show, strictly because Montel, as good as he is as a talk show host, he's a terrible actor, in my opinion. And so I'm watching the show, and he just looked like he was looked fake. He didn't look like he was living the part. And it really bothered me, especially someone who comes from theater. Sylvia Browne comes back on Montel, and she does her audience reads, and she was okay in the audience reads. And then Montel says, I have a question. My new show is going to be a success. He said, oh, yeah, honey, it's going to be big. It's going to be bigger than you think. It's going to be so picked up. You're going to be doing that show for years. That show didn't last a full season. That's how bad it was. It was gone. Right? I think she began to believe her press. I think she began to believe that she was this great psychic. And I think she began to really get into the celebrity of it. And I think when the celebrity kind of took over, she lost a lot of her natural gifts, because I think she ended up with the idea of having to put on the show, having to placate friends of hers who are giving her a platform. I think that she literally was coming down to this place where her whole celebrity status diminished her abilities. And I think it's sad, because I think she really did have some abilities. And I as I watched the later times, she just diminished and diminished and diminished. And you could see it. She'd come on, and then suddenly she was just gone after the big news article about telling the woman her family member was dead when they weren't. So she kind of like faded out of the picture. When I think of this, I think about all of the many gifted people that I've met in life, and how most of the time you can't put them in a room together, because they have this fragile sense of self because of their being so empathic. So they when they feel lifted, they grab a hold of that, and their awareness becomes part of that, and they step into a more of a self-aggrandizement, as opposed to a humble, just being a messenger, a deliverer of messages. And I think when you start getting down the road of I'm a celebrity and I'm the end all be all, then what happens is your whole expression of self is about the celebrity as opposed to the work. And I really do think that's what happened with Sylvia Browne. And I understand that her family, her son, went on and did readings afterwards. I don't know if that's still going on or not. I hope that he's if he's still doing it, I hope he's about the work. Because I think that is the important part of it, is the work, being there for the people in front of them, as opposed to for yourself or for your friends. I think that as with all people, when we get a little bit of encouragement, especially coming from a place where you haven't been encouraged, then what happens is we tend to grab a hold of that encouragement. And we can fall into the victim of believing our own press, believing our own self-importance. And I think that is something we all need to look out for. We all need to keep an eye out for whether or not we are being humble and true to ourselves, rather than trying to fulfill a greater image. So that's really my thought on Sylvia Browne. I hope that makes sense. I think she was a very gifted person who really truly got lost in celebrity. And that's my thought on that. And I'm going to try to avoid doing any more of these celebrity review people things. It's not my cup of tea, really. But people are asking, so I'm responding. So there's your thought